Hello, Sri Swami. How are you doing?
Good, good. Are you doing well too?
I am doing well. We're having the same conversation because we actually started a while ago, but then church bells went off, so we had to wait
About
for
10
them to
minutes.
be, yeah, about 10 minutes. So we're ready to start. Now, in your first session, in our first session together, you surprised me by saying there's more than one type of astrology. I had no idea. I thought, well, the stars are where they're supposed to be, the planets are where, I mean, I guess it's all in the interpretation. And we decided to talk about Indian astrology. And if you want to, you can give some comparisons to other. I mean, how many astrology methods are there?
Okay, there are so many. And if we really examine it, the few that I know are, for instance, the Incas had their own astrology, the Mayans had their own astrology. If you go to Machu Picchu, the structures of Machu Picchu are designed based on astrology. And it works till today. I went out there, they have a compass, a stone compass, that is actually accurate till today. And then the windows built in those stone structures are based on the movement of Venus, like when Venus appears, and they know exactly that when they see a bright star through a series of windows, that's when Venus is visiting them, and that's how they would make predictions. So astrology is practiced by many, many traditions all over the world. I would say in Eastern, in Asia, we have some of that. I definitely the Aborigines have a certain way of predicting using astrology. We have something in the Sumerians, the Mesopotamians, which we know of, the Greeks and the Arabians, and of course the modern world. But every tradition has one form of astrology or the other. The question then becomes which one is sophisticated or less. And so you'll find there's tremendous variations between.
Uh-oh, you froze. Come on back. Oh, no.
I can hear
Oh,
you
there.
though.
There we
There.
go. There we go. Okay.
All
All
right.
right.
I don't remember where I froze, but let me start over again.
Um,
Um,
well, let me ask you real quickly
yeah,
before I forget. The American or the Western
right.
modern form of
Astrology.
astrology. Well, who created that, invented that, or was it a cooperative effort?
Okay, so if we look at the Western astrology, is based on the tropical sign. Now, the way it came out is actually it started. I mean, there was Kepler who was out in Germany who started reviving some of the astrological information that he gained. And then there was somebody in England called Lewin, or I forget his name. But basically, these are the two people that started reviving Western astrology, which was completely destroyed during the medieval time and during what I would call the time of the Inquisition.
Why? Because they thought you're like working with the devil, things like that. So it's not
Exactly.
allowed.
So it was not. If you were practicing astrology, then you're a witch. What is
Oh,
also interesting about that, the best and the largest collection of astrological information is with the Vatican today. Some of
oh,
that, which was actually cryptic, was actually stored in a library in France called it's Bonaparte's library, in Napoleon Bonaparte's library, and he had gotten the information or some of this text from the Egyptians.
mm.
Now, a lot of this was actually stored in the Hellenistic language, which is, let's say, 300 BC to 680.
Is that
And
Greek?
during
Like Greek, sort of.
Greek, yeah, totally Greek.
Okay.
And
Oh,
so what happens is if you really trace the history of astrology, it actually, if I can go back right to the ancient times, my understanding and the research I've done is that originally there was Indian astrology, and I'll tell you why. Because as I talked about it earlier, that a lot of the information that was contained in the Vedas was actually revealed information. That means it was channeled information. So all of that channeled information was actually compiled into a system that was workable. Until today, Indians use the same system of astrology. Now, here's the interesting thing, that astrology is based on astronomy. So we in India, or in ancient time, which is 6,000 or 8,000 years ago, actually would know the speed of the planets, the size of the planets, and the distances of those planets right from 6,000 years ago. And that system is still used in India till today.
That is amazing.
It is.
Gosh, I mean, it's not like they had, telescopes 6,000 years ago, did they? So
Absolutely not. Yeah, they didn't have computers that we have today. They did not have the Hubble telescope. They did not have the telescopes and the computation power that we have today. But then how did they know is the big question. And
maybe extraterrestrials gave them the information?
Well, and that's the thing, is that there were wise beings that actually channeled the information through what we call the rishis, or the sages of India. And these sages, because they have a really sophisticated language. You see, for instance, when you talk to Erik, you'll find, or if some of the channelers are talking to Erik, Erik is trying to say something, but then the level of our understanding and Erik's understanding is so different that, what he's saying, we're not quite getting it because we don't understand what he's trying to say. So we are fumbling because of the language that we use and the terminologies that we use. And I can see, because of the understanding that I have, when he says something, I really get it in terms of a broader perspective, just because of my training.
Right.
But the same thing happens is that when the information is channeled, you've got to have a common language to describe things that a human has never seen or experienced before.
Yeah, because language can be very limiting. I mean, Erik says you don't have this, the thing I want to express, it's not in your vocabulary. There's not a word, there's not a phrase. And, I guess images and telepathy and channeling emotion and things like that is, what could make it more accurate, I guess.
Absolutely. And that's the major challenge for human beings to receive information.
Yeah.
And you see that, and I've seen it actually even with Erik, trying to talk to us. Here's the thing. In the Indian tradition, there is this facility called the Sanskrit language. Now, the Sanskrit language, as I talked about it last time, is like a painting. You can use words because the words are defined in such a way, the structure of the language itself is that you can create words as you go, and you would understand what I'm saying because I'm just creating the words based on the rules of Sanskrit language.
What do you mean?
So what happens is, I'll give you an analogy.
Okay.
I take 7 colors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you give me 7 colors. I take those same very colors that and I'm going to use those 7 colors to make a painting, to draw a painting. Mm-hmm. Okay, you get to see what I'm painting because of the way I combined the 7 colors to present a painting. Of course, you see the painting the way I see the painting. It was in my mind's eye, and I put it down on paper. Okay. Now, the Sanskrit language is based on, let's say, 2,000 roots. So you don't need a dictionary.
Right.
And each word, right, is actually modified by a prefix and a suffix.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, you have cook, which is the act of cooking. But then if you change it to cooker, that totally changes the entire meaning of the word.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So the same way, in Sanskrit, we all know the 2,000 words, the 2,000 roots, and if I add a suffix or a prefix, it changes the meaning of it. So what happens is, in Sanskrit language, we all know the prefixes and the suffixes and the roots, these 2,000 word roots. And basically, I can make up words because I just patch up a suffix and a prefix, and you get to hear what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating.
Right? It is, and it's incredibly structured. It's really, really like a computer programming language. In fact, most of the computer programmers reveal that Sanskrit is the best coding language because it uses the same principle of programming.
Fascinating. Wow. Okay, so how did it Sanskrit? I know this is not on the topic, but I just really want to know, how did it arise?
Again, it came in through the channeled information because, for instance, the script is called a Devanagari. Devanagari really means the script of the gods.
Ah.
And the language also came in through the gods. So the gods would start initially, or through evolution, it started creating. So you find that if you do the etymology of English words or most of the languages, even you'll find most of the Western languages are derived from Germanic and Latin-based languages. Those actually come from Sanskrit, because Sanskrit provides a real structure, which then other languages picked up. For instance, the word man, comes from Sanskrit, and I can go on and on and on. Sun, all of these come from Sanskrit, and we have specific meaning, underlining theoretical meaning for each root in Sanskrit.
Okay.
So it's quite fascinating. Now, coming back to a way of communicating with other beings, other extraterrestrial beings, or we call them angels, or we call them whatever, guides. What they did is they were able to create these feelings and images in our minds, but then we had a language. So they could communicate through those words that we understand. So for instance, when Erik is saying something, when he starts cursing, basically we feel that, we know it, right? And that's exactly how they were able to channel this information. So what they did is they said, hey, during these times, if a planet is in a certain position, this is the influences that we have. So, and the size of the planets, and it moves in this at this speed. It retrogrades at this time. And those calculations, those astronomical calculations that they presented 6,000 years ago were incredibly accurate. So you find today Western science or Western astronomy actually validates a lot of this information that was presented 6,000 or 10,000 years ago. Now, I say 6,000 is because that's when they said it. You find some books and things like that. I believe, and there's some other books and some other research. So, for instance, when we would hear that the planets revolve around a stationary sun, that was not true. Today, we see that the sun moves along with its harem of planets in a cyclical, in a cycle that actually rotates around for 36,000 years.
Wow.
And so you find all of this information in a body of knowledge called the Vedas, which to me was incredibly fascinating that these guys would actually come up with these systems that today we actually find it to be true, which, blows my mind.
I'm sure NASA astronomers probably study some of the information too.
They don't go too much into the astrological part. They do go into the astronomical part. So
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so Western astronomy. And by the way, in the ancient times, we did have the whole field of astronomy, which is called Ganita, actually. And because astronomy and astrology went together, it was a common field. And so astrology was looking at what are the impacts of the planets and the stars on each one of us. And so that's how it all originated. Now, unfortunately, a lot of this was highly sacred information, which was not revealed unless you were actually trained in it, whether you apprenticed for 20, 30, 40 years before you were qualified to go out and teach it. Unfortunately, over time, there was actually record research done by the National Geographic, which talked about the Ramesses and the Egyptian periods. So they said, and there's actually documentaries which I watched many years ago, where they talked about the Egyptians actually hijacking and holding some of these great wise men from India and forced them to actually reveal the knowledge. If not, they would actually kill their kids or their children. Or their family. So you find that during 4,000 years ago, the information from India started moving west. And a lot of that went to Sumeria, Mesopotamia. Of course, now in Mesopotamia and Sumeria, they had their own form of traditional astrology, which they interwoven with the Indian astrology. Now, a lot of that actually ended up coming to Egypt. Now, in Egypt, when the Greeks ruled Egypt, when Greeks ruled Egypt during 300 BC, that's when the Egyptians started actually writing down what the Egyptians knew. And so you find a great many authors of Greek astrology, or Hellenistic astrology, as we call it, were actual Greek authors who were priests in the Library of Alexandria, or even during that time, during the Alexandrian period.
So was that
And
the first time it was recorded?
that was the first time when it was recorded.
Okay.
Now, that information actually was, because it was preserved, it was actually written in Arabic and written in Hellenistic language. Now, because during the Socrates time and the Aristotle periods, they actually started studying astrology at that time. So you find a lot of the philosophy, a lot of the ideas, which actually is the cradle of Western civilization, was formed and guided a lot because of astrological information. In fact, if you read Aristotle Metaphysics, you'll find there's a lot of astrology in it.
Socrates, wow, so astrology is has profoundly influenced civilization.
Exactly, till today. I mean, when people say, I don't believe in astrology, hey, do you believe in the weekdays? Because the 7 days of the week is based on astrology. Sunday is based on the Sunday, on the sun. Monday is based on the moon. Tuesday is based on Mars. Wednesday is based on Mercury. Thursday is based on Jupiter. Friday is based on Venus. Saturday is based on Saturn. So you find that the cycle of planets is what influences us till today. And why 7? Why not 10?
Yeah.
Right? Because of the 7 planets.
Oh, but not including Pluto. That didn't include Pluto, right? Did they?
It didn't include outer planets at that time. Of course,
outer planets, yeah.
Yeah. In Indian tradition, they did have knowledge of the outer planets. They did not include it because it was a generational thing.
What do you mean?
So, for instance, when you look at the movement of Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune, it takes a long time. So I'm not sure how long Neptune goes, but Uranus is like about 18 years. And so you find that these planets take over decades. I'm not too into outer planets as much.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I think it's so funny how I was raised to say Uranus, but now people don't say that. They just don't dare. So it's Uranus now.
It's Uranus, yeah.
Oh,
and then Pluto was considered gas recently, and then it's reverted back to planet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, it got planet status again?
It got planet status again.
You go, Pluto!
Exactly.
Right,
so there's a lot of confusion about that. But, you know, in the Indian tradition, Pluto is a planet. No doubts about it. We have actually records for all of the outer planets. But in terms of day-to-day life, it didn't have tremendous impact as the other 7 traditional planets.
Now, let me ask you this. How does the movement of planets, the position of planets, why does that affect human life? Does it affect our energy? I mean, what is it about stars and planets that have any kind of remote effect on our behavior, our choices, our situation, or whatever it has effects on?
Brilliant question. That was actually the question that Aristotle asked.
It's what I do. I'm kidding.
Aristotle asked that question, and he said, you know, how come these stupid planets we don't even see affect a measly little person like me who's down on Earth or any other creature? And, you know, this is a fundamental question that we need to understand in order to appreciate astrology. Now, the Greeks asked those questions because at first they did not understand, you know, how it would have any impact. Here's the thing. Remember last time we talked about reincarnation and we talked about our karmas, our acts. So what happens is when we do these contracts, as we call soul contracts or whatever they call them, before we're born, we choose our lives. We choose our parents. We choose basically certain features, significant features of our lives. When we choose that, we make that decision, and once we make that decision, we are born with that blueprint. That's our plan for this lifetime. Okay, so that's our journey. So for instance, I try to exemplify this with, let's say, when you want to go somewhere, you know the destination of where you want to go before you put it into your GPS, right? And so you don't go into your car and start driving around and say, okay, now I'm going to go somewhere. You don't pick your destination once you're in the car. I mean, sometimes if you are kind of waiting around, then you might change your mind. But when you're at home drinking a cup of coffee, you just say, okay, well, let me go into my car and I'm going to decide where I'm going to go once I'm out there, So what happens typically, what we do is we know where we're going before we get into the car.
Yeah.
Right. We know our destination.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, with the luck of and with the advanced technologies, we actually can even look at it on a GPS. We plan it out. We probably go to Google Maps. We know exactly how to go and how long it's going to take and what turns we need to make and what traffic roads to avoid for traffic or cops or, bad weather.
Yeah.
So we have those choices today.
Yeah.
Now, in the what happens is when we are born, we already have a destination in mind. We have a blueprint of our journey in each particular life. Okay? So, given that journey, we then are born with a certain vibration, certain frequency. Like, for instance, in a radio in the olden days when you actually had to use a dial
to tune,
to tune it. So there's a certain frequency that you're on.
Mm-hmm.
So the combination of these planets actually creates a certain vibration for you.
Oh, wow.
And what happens then
at the moment of your birth?
At the moment of your birth.
Is that decided, like you have this in-between lives planning where you get counseling on, okay, what do you want on your plate? Are you sure? And things like that. And you sort of plan out your life. And so is that when? That's
right. When you decide and when you make a plan and you say, okay, this is what I want, and it's all decided, then you get this, you go through, I'm kind of using a mechanical example, but it's not quite like that. It's like, okay, this is your blueprint, and you get to, like a machine stamp that says, okay, now you're set. And when you are born, the moment of your birth is actually where that vibration is created.
But do you decide, okay, I want my moment of birth, I'm going to wait because I want it to be when these planets and stars are like this so I can get this particular vibration? Or is it totally like, okay, you're born and boom, the planets stamp you?
Yeah, so you don't really choose based on the knowledge of astrology.
Okay.
What happens is you say, this is what I want, right? I want to have 6 kids, and I want to have 4 wives, and I want to have 10 mansions, and I need about 200 cars, and then I need probably, an ashram with a lot of guns and Rolls Royces. So basically, so what happens is you choose certain things that you want in a particular lifetime. Or you want to choose and say, I'm going to be the president of the United States, right?
Okay.
So you choose that. And what happens then when you make those decisions, then the universe conspires to actually have you come into Earth at a particular time when certain vibrations are activated.
Oh,
okay. So when you're born, the moment of your birth is a very decisive factor because that's the vibration, the universal vibration that is activated. So for instance, if you're a sailor and you didn't have, you were just looking at the movement of the waves, and you say, when the tide is high, this is when I'm going to take off, right?
Right.
So you make a decision to embark on your journey based on the tide. This is what sailors do.
Yeah.
And so this is exactly what humans do, but it's not based on just the moon, it's based on everything else. So then you'll be guided as a soul, you'll be guided by the angels and say, now's the time. And so we pick a time that is based on our choice. We'll be guided as to when to do that. So you find the time of birth is really critical in determining certain vibrations that are imprinted in us.
Well, can you change that imprinted, or can anything change that imprinted vibration that you get at birth?
Sometimes, and not all the time. For instance, the color of your skin, the color of your eyes, you can't change that unless you do surgery, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Your sexual orientation, your
Right.
choice of your parents,
Mm-hmm.
how many kids you're going to have, that's predetermined. Who you're
Okay.
going to get married, that is predetermined. What kind of life you're going to have in terms of wealth, in terms of stature, in terms of health, all of these things are determined, and this is why astrology works.
Well, what about free will? That can change so
Here's the
much.
thing, and that's why I was using the analogy of a car and GPS. So thank you for asking me, because this is really critical to understand this.
Yeah.
When you get into the car, you have chosen your destination, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you go into your car and you have a GPS. And the GPS tells you turn right, turn left, 10 miles down the road, take this highway, blah, blah, blah. You're in that journey towards your destination, you have free will.
Yeah, it's like, hey, man, I want some jerky from Buc-ee's. I'm going to take a little side trip.
Exactly.
Okay.
You take detours. You can stop the car whenever you want. You can take pit stops as many as you want. You can also choose to ignore the woman on the GPS.
Mm-hmm.
If she tells you turn left, you go, oh, no, I would just want to go ahead. I changed my mind. You can do that. And this
She
is
can get bitchy. You got to watch out. Rerouting.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. At least she doesn't curse back. So
That's true.
she just says recalculating very politely. Yeah.
Right.
She doesn't get, she gets, a bit testy, but she doesn't get really nasty about it.
No.
So the thing about astrology, the way it works, especially Indian astrology, is not about, if you're Leo and you have beautiful mane or something like that, it doesn't talk so much about your personality. Of course, it can do, but the usage of Indian astrology is really in the olden times to predict the weather for farmers. So it was a great way of almanac to almanac. It was a great almanac to predict the weather.
Farmer's Almanac, is that what it's based on? Really?
Yeah.
Well, didn't Benjamin Franklin start the Farmer's Almanac or not?
He did, and he was an astrologer.
Oh my God! All these surprises. I can't stand it.
Yeah, Benjamin Franklin was an amazing guy who, if you look at his bio, he was incredibly knowledgeable about a lot of things. And one of his things that he was really well known for is astrology. So he developed the almanac that we know in the U.S. based on Western astrology. Now, you see, what happened is, talking about free will, it's really important to understand that when we're on our journey, we can make choices. We can take detours, you can change your mind and things like that. So you still are very empowered to make changes along the way.
Okay. But does it still mean that you get the same destination? You just take a scenic route sometime?
Exactly. So your destination is predetermined because that was a contract you made before you're born.
Okay.
So for instance, I say, for instance, for you and Erik, his destiny was to leave early. It was to die. So what happened was it created a certain feeling in you to actually embark on a mission to figure out why did this happen. Okay. Based on that, you are creating tremendous influence around the world by opening it up and sharing what you went through and trying to discover that process so that it is real to a lot of people. Otherwise, it would be unreal. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the impact that Erik has had through your channel, it's truly profound and amazing to thousands of people, which otherwise would not have had this opportunity. I mean, I
just don't get that. For some reason, it just seems so unreal to me.
Right.
Now, speaking of Erik says there is no karma. There's no external force telling you, okay, you messed up with that life. You're going to have to, do this again. Go back in another life and until you learn it. So, but you talk about karma a lot. Are you guys at odds in that, or can you reconcile the fact that it's not one external force saying like the karma police?
Right. So it's also, the way we communicate and the way we understand karma are two different things. For instance, karma in the West is understood as a negative
Yeah.
result. Like you did something wrong in the other world in one lifetime, and then you come back to pay out for it,
Mm.
and you get punished for it. That is totally not what karma is to begin with.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And so you see, that's the problem, is when we're trying to communicate concepts, we don't understand the fundamental meaning of the word, and we use it randomly and loosely and then assume different things. What Erik says is not different from what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that in every lifetime, we commit certain actions, and this is how we create our house. We create our homes based on our actions. So all religions, without exception, will say you sow what you reap.
That's right.
Okay,
You
that's
reap
not.
what you sow. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Right.
reap what you sow.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I'm dyslexic, so I tend to switch things around. Thank you for correcting me. So anyway, so the thing is, every religion talks about you reap what you sow.
Mhm.
That's the law of karma, period. And in Sanskrit, karma simply does not mean what you get back. Karma simply means your actions, how you behave. Karma in the Indian context means what you sow. Now, what you reap comes back later in this lifetime or another lifetime.
Mhm.
And for instance, if I did something that was painful to someone else,
Mhm.
there are two things about it. I didn't realize I am causing that pain to that person, whether I do it intentionally or not. I do it because of my ignorance and because of my greed.
Mm.
Okay? In the next lifetime, that action is going to come back not to punish me. And this is something we should just get out of our mind. These actions do not come back as a punishment. The world is about love. It's not about punishment.
Oh, yeah.
It is about us learning. Okay, learning and understanding that what we do has a consequence, and that consequence can be a good thing or it can be a painful thing. So, for instance, in the Indian tradition, we don't consider sin to exist. In fact, there is absolutely no sin.
Well, that's what Erik
Yeah,
says.
yeah, exactly.
It's everything. There's no good. There's no bad. There's just
Exactly.
is, and they're valuable experiences.
Absolutely. And that is exactly what I'm saying too. However, because we're creating certain actions, we're here to learn and grow, we need to go through a certain period or a certain understanding of what is it that we're learning, what is it that we need to grow from. And so these negative experiences, we in the Indian tradition don't say bad or good. What we say is positive or negative. So positive means that I enjoy something. I enjoy a good home. I enjoy loved ones around me. I enjoy a Lamborghini, or I enjoy a good cup of coffee. These are good karmas that come back to me,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm spending. And if I use my last analogy, I talk about the ATM, cashing out. Okay, so that's exactly what it is. Now, in terms of learning, okay, there are certain things I did not know. For instance, in your case, you did not know about this whole world before Erik went.
Mm-mm.
Okay,
That's right.
now you had to learn this.
Yeah.
And there's a purpose why you're learning it. It's not just so that you can sit home and be content. It's because you're trying to actually bring this information to a lot of people, make it accessible, and heal and appease many, many other human beings who are watching this channel.
Including myself.
Absolutely. And this is what we do, is that through our own experiences, we teach others. Through our own experiences, we learn. And how do we learn? Is through these experiences. When we have the maturity and the courage to actually overcome the challenges we have, is when we learn. God or any system of religion or a belief system, or if you eliminate every form of belief system and look at the way the universe was structured, it's based on certain laws. There's a certain order. Now, if the planets decide, oh, I'm so bored going around and around and around for years, I'm just doing this for centuries, I'm so bored, I want to change. What do you think will happen? It doesn't happen. There's a planetary order. There's an order of the moon rotating around the sun. There's an order of the water going from a high elevation to a lower elevation. Plants grow up from the ground. birds fly. So you find that everything has a particular order. Our behavior is within that order. It's not a belief system. And
Well,
because it's, yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
okay, I'm sorry, but okay. So say you murder somebody,
Right.
and you have to come back to the next life and maybe be murdered, but can't you choose? Like, ugh, I don't want to deal with that right now. I mean, there is free will. I mean,
Right.
karma is not like forced on you, right? The soul chooses to. Okay, I need to
Right.
learn. I'm going to choose to be,
Right.
victimized in some way this next life, right?
Correct. And
Okay.
let me use your example. That's a great example. I use that a lot. So, for instance, you kill me in this lifetime. Guess what? Next lifetime, I'm going to kill you.
Uh-huh.
We have to ask the first question, why did you kill me? You killed me because you didn't know any better. It was ignorance. You did not understand the effect or the impact it would have on me and my loved ones and on you. All right? So what's going to happen? Let's say next lifetime, I'm going to do the same thing. Another lifetime, you're going to do the same thing. So we're going to keep doing this. All right? Until one of us, not both of us, until one of us figures out a way to break the cycle.
Yes.
Okay? And how does that happen? And this is where free will comes in. Okay, because this chain of killing each other was already set, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's why knowledge is so important. Because if I realize that hurting you is wrong, then I, even though I might have a gun ready and I'm so desperate to kill you, even though I have a gun and I'm about to pull the trigger, something in me, the maturity in me, my soul, my spirits, my guides are going to say, don't do that.
Yeah.
In fact, they do tell us all the time to not do that. We just don't listen.
Oh, yeah.
So if we listen the
We're
first
like
time, it
kids.
won't happen.
We don't listen to our parents. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the fundamental problem is we don't listen. Now, what happens is when a soul matures and gains wisdom, then we know that, hey, even though I'm so desperate to kill this person, I'm going to stop. This is just not right. And you'll find a lot of people, you'll find that they were about to pull the trigger. They're about to do something else. Like in my case, I almost tried to commit suicide 3 times and I didn't do it.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what happens is at that point, there's something that intervenes,
Mm-hmm.
including your wisdom, and says, don't do it. When you listen, you have broken that chain.
Yeah.
And the significance of the free will is to know what to do in terms of what is right and what is wrong. And this is why the whole cycle, the order of karma plays out. And once that's why we're here to learn. You see, when we talk about we're supposed to be born, we're here to learn. And when we learn what is it, the lessons that we need to learn in this particular lifetime, we take that wisdom with us. And I keep saying this over and over again, is that the only things that we take with us when we die is our wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
our good actions, good deeds, and our negative deeds. All right? So those are the only things we carry over. We don't take our fame, name, or
possessions. Yeah. So I think that it seems like living in oneness and really getting oneness, really marching through your life, knowing that you are part of the whole, the collective,
right.
seems to obviate the whole karma thing, right?
Exactly. And this is what people don't understand. You see, the thing is that if you just play out your role with love, this is why love is so important. When we talk about living in love, knowing how to respond in love, and that's what I talked about last time. I said, we don't know how to live with love.
Yeah.
And we think love is that loving somebody else or that we need somebody to love us. So the whole teaching of the oneness is to understand that we're all one and that Saddam Hussein, Hitler, Osama bin Laden, the guy who kidnapped my child, all of these people are part of me.
Yeah.
And if you look at your body parts, they're not even comparable. If you look at your toes and your fingers, they're completely different. Your fingers don't do what your toes do.
Yeah, but it's still part of the whole body.
Exactly. And this is exactly how we look at the whole oneness thing, is in order to understand that we are really, really one. And when we
do you even feel one only with living creatures, or can I be one with my With my Erik cup.
Exactly. We're one with everything. I mean, you
Wow.
see, if you say that we're one, I'm one with only living creatures, then there's no oneness, because now all the rocks and the stones are different, you know. So,
Poor.
so in India, what we say, that the rivers are alive, the earth is alive. We call
True.
Earth Mother Earth. We don't call it a planet. I mean, it's a planet, yes, but it's alive and it has feelings. And by the way, didn't you guys do some, I think you guys channeled Earth or somebody,
Yeah, I
something
think so.
like
Yeah.
that? And
Uh,
I think,
I don't know if I think we did. It could be
yeah,
Allison. All right, let's get back to Indian
astrology.
astrology.
Right.
What is different about that? I'm very
So,
interested in that.
so exactly. Now, before it got corrupted, and I was talking about its alienation to modern times.
Mm.
Basically, Indian astrology does all the same features. It can talk about, you know, your personality. It can talk about your wife's personality. It can talk about your siblings' personalities, and it can talk about your relatives' personalities, and including their health and when they're going to fall sick. It can go really far into that.
Wow.
However, the point of Indian astrology is not to talk and to glorify whether you're a Leo with beautiful hair. It's actually with a beautiful mane. It's really about talking about your journey. It is a GPS system for you to go
Ah.
where you are now and where your destination is. And essentially, what happens if we looked before we had all these gadgets and before we had Google Maps and things like that, what did we do before?
We ask for directions, I guess, from our neighbors or whatever, or we use key maps. Oh, oh
Yeah,
God.
before there were maps, before even there were maps, basically what would happen is that you would actually, if you were in a caravan or a pony, you would stop and ask somebody along the way to
Yeah.
say, hey, I want to go, you know, you're in Dallas and you want to go to Chicago, and somebody says, okay, head up north, and points you the right way, if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, somebody will point you towards Houston or to El Paso. So, you know, and then down the road, you figure out that you got lost, or maybe this is the wrong way. The guy who kind of directed you who didn't know what he was talking about. So, and then while you're down in El Paso, you get hit by a hurricane, and now you got to hunker down, or you got washed away by the floods, or something like that. So you got to then wait it out,
Yeah.
and then wait another 6 months before you can get your caravan together and head up north. And
I
then
got a quick story, GPS story. Well, we didn't have GPS. I don't even know if we had MapQuest. But when I was going to drive from Houston to Austin to take my medical boards, I was with one of my friends who was going to do the same. And, you know, you take I-70 to Austin. And you know, I thought I was going in the right direction. But all of a sudden I saw seagulls. Like, what? I went the opposite way, south, near El Campo, I think. So it's like, and you're going to take the boards and pass them? You can't even get to the boards, but I did. Anyway, that was an irrelevant story. Go on.
exactly. So that is typically the way we lead our lives.
Yeah.
Now, Indian astrology especially if it's done the way I do it, or the way most people would do it, is kind of giving you the direction. It kind of, what I do typically is give you the full layout, because we have time periods, like within certain times, there are certain events, certain themes that play out mostly during one particular time. So there's usually like 7-year themes, 8-year themes, 16-year themes, 12-year themes, 18 years and 20 years and 30 years. So you'll find with certain people, these themes vary. And within those themes is when people will actually have successes or have major changes in their lives. So what happens is, when I do these readings, I talk about these major themes. Like, you know, from now till now, you're going to, and I do ask about the past, because the past validates what I'm seeing. You see, because like when somebody sees you as a doctor, they have to kind of tell you the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell people right away, look, I'm not a psychic, I'm not a channeler. What we're doing is we're using Indian astrology to look at your roadmap in this lifetime, and how can I help you in this roadmap so you stay on track rather than getting lost. So for instance, you were lucky that you made it to the board exams. Otherwise, in certain other places, you'd be far down the road that you would not have time to come back for the exams. You know,
Yeah.
And so this is what happens with us in daily lives. When we're at crossroads, when there are 2 or 3 turns to make and you don't know which one to take, this is the best time to actually contact me. Or if you're suffering and you're going through a really difficult time and you want to know when this is going to be over, that's the time to actually check and see when. Because you find out when you know when it's going to end, at least it gives you a sense of peace to say, well, this is not going to be my life all the way this way.
Oh, that's so valuable. Also, there's a lot of, at least the blog members, these are people, of course, search for spiritual answers. They feel lost, like they're not on their spiritual path. They sort of took the scenic route. So you can help them with that to find.
So exactly, and so what happens is now in my readings, I bring in a lot of my business experience because I've got over 30 years of that, my technical experience, and then also I did a lot of counseling over the years. So it's like you get a full package of many different fields, and I use astrology as a roadmap. So then the question becomes, okay, now you got to make a turn. How well can you make that turn? And basically, also it works the same way. Like for instance, you have a pothole down the road, or the bridge has been washed away. So I'll say, hey, take a detour now.
Yeah.
So one of the other examples I gave is that of a farmer. Mm-hmm. Okay, so for instance, you're a farmer and you had a great harvest this year. And over Thanksgiving dinner, you invite me over because we're friends, and I come over and I say, hey, wow, I'm so impressed with what you did. And I ask you, I say, how did you do this? Because we're friends, you'll tell me exactly where to get the right seeds, how to till the soil, how to sow it, how to take care of the farm over the summer. And then in the fall, what you do with your harvest and where to take it so you can get those money back and all that. I'm so excited by your story. The very next day after dinner, I go out and do exactly what you said. I take my investment, I put it all into this whole project. And not only that, I've got like 6 kids who are hungry and I need to feed them. So I'm really, really motivated.
And you put your friend out of business with your competition.
Exactly. Well, that could be true. But basically what happened is I keep doing all that. And then by Christmas rolls around and nothing happens, I come back to you and I say, hey, I did exactly what you said. And you're surprised because I should have waited till spring.
Oh, okay.
So what happens is many times we make these investments when it's not right timing. We do a lot of things when it's not right during the right time. So astrology helps us when to take a vacation, when to chill out. During our winter period is when we actually rest. We take a time out. We plan for the spring. When the first rain comes in, that's when we're ready to sow. We don't wait till spring to start planning.
Are you talking in metaphors, or is?
I'm talking in metaphors.
Okay, I thought so.
I'm totally talking in metaphors.
Because I'm sitting there planning my vacation for the winter then.
Exactly, right. Yeah. So I'm talking totally in metaphors so that we can understand what astrology does. It's not something to say, well, you're going to be doomed after 6 years, or you're going to have this and that. There's certain things we can say, like, for instance, you're going to have 3 kids or 2 kids, and, but then that is also all based on interpretation. And so the person who interprets requires a lot of experience and art. So I use another example. For instance, you gave me those 7 color pencils. Remember I talked about the 7 colors? Right. So you give it to a 2-year-old. A 2-year-old will really draw you artwork. You cannot say that his artwork is lousy, right?
No.
So it's beautiful for a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
But then you take the same 7 colors and you give it to Michelangelo. What are you going to get?
Oh, God.
Totally different thing, right? The same color pencil.
So you're Michelangelo of astrology.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't claim that at all. But I do help people to the extent I can, whenever I can.
Well, can you determine exit points, potential exit points?
There are ways to do that. I just don't know how to do that. I tried.
And I wouldn't. I don't think it's a good idea.
Exactly. It's ethically not good. And on top of it, I tried miserably to predict the death of my parents, and it didn't work out. I failed miserably. So I just don't do that. And when my teacher was actually teaching this particular feature, there's a calculation that one has to make. That was the only class I missed. And then when I came back the next day to try to learn it, it didn't work out either. So I'm like,
Because
I'm
the
not supposed to know
timing
that.
was wrong. Can you
Exactly.
help people determine their spiritual purpose, their life purpose, mission?
Yes, we can see that through a chart. We can also do sometimes, we can look at past lives and we can look at future lives. Um,
Oh,
so
wow.
some of the things that are going on in this life is based on certain patterns that played out in the past lives. And sometimes we can figure out what we need to learn in this particular lifetime. But again, you see, what happens is what I try to do is actually focus on what they need right now. What people need right now is you're driving down the highway, you need to know when the next turn is. Because if I give you 6 turns from now, it doesn't make any sense. You won't remember it.
Oh, no, I won't, definitely.
Right. So the guidance is actually to help you in your journey to stay right on your path and take the right turns when the turns come up. And so basically that's where I bring in all of my my experiences with cultures, because again, in different cultures you have to interpret differently based on that
Oh, my
particular culture. So
gosh.
it's very different.
Art and science. I'm wondering, are you sure you don't channel some of this?
I do actually. Some of
Yeah,
it is channeling,
that's
but
cool.
we use the tools we use these tools, which gives me a lot more equipment,
Hmm.
and then I can channel deeper. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't Western astrologers who are really good astrologers. There are good astrologers, not because the tool is good. They're good astrologers because they're more psychic and channelers
I know.
rather than.
I got my first astrological reading from Joe Barganier, and I swear I thought she's not just. I mean, she's got a. This is channeled. I mean, she must be psychic because it was really good.
Right. So, for instance, I say the same thing. Like when you look at, for instance, a tea leaf, somebody who does tea leaves,
Hmm.
or tarot cards, or pendulums. I mean, all of these things—they're just the divination tools. At the end
Yeah.
of the day, you as a channeler should be able to actually be able to have the language to be able to interpret what you see. That's the difference between a 2-year-old with the 7 color pencils and
Yeah.
the Michelangelo. And that's
Exactly.
where the difference is. The science of astrology is common. However, just to wrap up the whole journey of astrology very quickly, and we can go deeper into it if you would like at another time. So basically, Indian astrology was actually channeled by extraterrestrial beings, and they were able to record it because of the language that facilitated the complexities and the technicalities of astronomy and astrology also. Because Indian astrology not only uses the 7 planets, it uses 27 stars.
Oh, wow.
So you have basically the planets. So we use 7 planets basically and 2 nodes, and then above that, that is within the drawback of the 12 signs. So here's the question: why do we use 12 months and not 12 signs? I mean, and not 10 months.
Hmm.
So the 12 signs are based on. I mean, the 12 months are based on the 12 signs. So this is where astrology plays an important factor again. Even the names like January, February, March, April, May, June, these are
Yeah.
all based on astrology.
Yeah.
Okay, so Indian astrology looks the bottom is your planets,
Hmm.
the first layer, closest layer. The layer above that is the stars. We have 27 stars that actually subdivide each of the zodiac, the 360 degrees, and each sign or each segment is about 13.5 degrees. So each sign, a zodiac sign, is about 30 degrees.
Hmm.
So if you look at the whole diameter or the whole diagram, the circumference is 360 degrees divided by 12. That makes it 30 degrees. Now, what happens is the planets are determined. The influences are based on the stars behind it,
Oh, yeah.
and then the stars fall on both the stars and the planets fall behind the drawback of the constellations, which are the zodiac signs. So there's three layers, and these stars, which are basically, they don't move. It's like the planet, sun. I mean, it's like the sun, star. So those stars actually just give us a very deeper nuances about the person or the event or things like that.
Okay.
So we can go much deeper again into.
I mean, they move in the galaxy, but in relation to us or the planets, they don't. Or yeah.
Exactly. So
Okay.
planets move. We move in the galaxies, but the constellations don't move because they're way up ahead, higher up than the planets and the stars.
Yeah, but what you see in the planet happened millions of years ago. So
Exactly, yeah.
so how
So
do
the
you
star
account
is
for that?
actually millions of years ago, so it doesn't affect us now in this time. So, and
Okay.
again, based on astrology, again, what happens is that what we are using is based on a system 6,000 years ago. That is actually a really insignificant amount of time when you compare that to millions and millions and millions miles away, right? So
Yeah.
it's a small portion. And when we get into an enlightened age or a wiser age, you'll find that there will be other channelers and other systems that would actually come and update it. But for our purposes right now, this works. Now, one of the big differences between the tropical and the sidereal is that if you look at a planet, and let me use an example here. If I look at this planet, and I'm going to use the silver spoon.
Okay.
Right? So here, this would be, this point here, the tip of the spoon would be a star. 2,000 years ago, the equator, right? If you take this slide as the equator, line here, would actually face, the equator would line up with, be in alignment with a star. What has happened since 2,000 years ago, the Earth is tilting.
Yeah.
Every 72 years, it tilts by a minute. So in 2,000 years, the Earth has tilted 24 degrees.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so the sidereal has taken into account this declination.
Whereas the tropic one, the Western astrology has not.
It has not.
Uh-oh.
So one of the things that happen is we find that people can debunk Western astrology so much because you find that there's lack of inaccuracies. Also, there isn't a tremendously refined system as we have in Indian astrology or the Greek astrology for that matter. If you look at the Mayan astrology, the Incas, their system of astrology was a lot more sophisticated than the Western.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Now, the Western astrology basically is based on the crumbs of real astrology.
Okay.
So you find that the original astrology went very well preserved to Mesopotamia, Sumeria, and to Egypt during 4,000 and even up to 2,000 years ago. It was also very, very well preserved until 300 before Christ was born, or 300 BCE. What happened then, some of that information, because it was already written, we have to remember that before it was an oral tradition that got preserved into a literal tradition. And in that literal, the scribes, it was a talent to be a scribe.
Oh, yeah.
So they were putting it into a Hellenistic form. So some of that information got preserved, but nobody could read it.
Oh.
So the whole techniques and the whole knowledge of astrology got lost. However, the Arabs, because they still had some of the information written in Arabic, they were actually using Arabian astrology. Now, later on, you find 600 AD or about that period, that some of the Arabian astrologers were starting to create astrology based on some of the crude astrology that they knew of. So they would come up with symmetrical things, or they would do some experimentation and say this works. Now, some of that Arabian, like what was the crumb or sort of destroyed information of astrology, ended up coming up to the European or during the medieval times. It came up to Europe, and it went up to Ireland, and of the Celtic astrology. Then we have also some of it up in Germany. And a lot of the medieval times, they had wise men. Those wise men, or the wizards, were astrologers.
Okay.
And that's why you see, when you look at some of the mythological stories, of medieval Europe, you had this wise men. They're all considered wise men, and they had these little hats pointy heads.
Was it like a moon or something on them, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, like
So they
Merlin.
were really astrologers, and basically what would happen is astrology was if you determine the astrology of the king or the queen, that showed the impact of the entire nation or the
Oh,
entire region.
yeah.
So, for instance, if we're looking at the U.S., we'd have to look at Trump's astrology chart and to figure out what's
Uh-oh.
happening in the U.S.
Uh-oh. So,
So, uh,
so,
yeah.
what was I going to say? Why do they call it the tropic for our
Right. So the
Tropic
Western,
of Cancer, that kind of thing?
right. So if you look at this little thing here, it has two lines here.
Tropic of Cancer,
So
Tropic of
Cancer, this
Capricorn.
is where the movement of the sun is between these 2 points,
I
right?
gotcha. Okay.
And this would point to a star.
Okay.
So it's tropical astrology. Now, 2,000 years ago, there was no difference between sidereal and tropical, so it worked very well.
Right. But
And during
the
the Greek
declination.
times, for instance,
Yeah.
they had no difference between the tropic and the sidereal, so it worked. The unfortunate thing is that over time, because the tilt has taken place,
So
we
that's
haven't
the gap between the two.
right.
Has
And the
worked.
gap is 24 degrees. So if you're
That's a
born
lot.
within those 24 degrees, it's a lot, you know. So it's really ego shattering for a Leo to find out that he or she is a Cancer, a weepy, whiny Cancer.
Oh,
in
no.
astrology.
Yeah, I hear that the whole, that all the astrological signs, at least in Western astrology, have shifted. So
Exactly.
I was born 4/21. Does that mean I'm still a Taurus? I don't know. We'll see.
4/21, you would be still a Taurus, yes.
Okay, because I'm still bullheaded. All right, so let's wrap up. And first of all, how long does it take if somebody
Okay.
asks for Indian astrological reading from you? How long does it take for them to get it back? And lastly, how do they contact you so that they can do that?
Okay. So basically, what I would need their birth date,
Mm-hmm.
exact time of birth, which they should probably check with their birth certificates or some notes, because the parents might not really remember it. You can even call the hospital; they might have a record of when you were born.
Yeah, and I've tried that, and at least my hospital, you need the long form birth certificate, because the regular ones now they don't come with birth weight or time. So the Bureau of Vital Statistics can get that for you. Okay,
right.
go ahead.
So once you get that, then it's worth it really to have the right time.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't have the right time, that's okay, because we can still work. There are certain things I can be definitive about, other things I can give you an approximation.
Okay.
But the moment you have a right time, that actually really helps to actually fine-tune your chart. Not only that, you would need the place of birth. So these three things are really important.
Do you need the GPS? I mean, the GPS location of your birth, or just
just the
Texas?
place.
Okay,
just the place, and I know what to do from there.
Okay.
So what happens then, I take it and I spend about 1 to 2 hours actually studying the chart.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talk over the phone, because it's a lot of information and it's really hard to write it or compile it in any way.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of time. So what happens is we have about 1 hour conversation about what's going on, and I try to address the situation you're in, whatever situation you're in right now, and help you guide through the next step. And in that also, I give you the whole entire roadmap.
Mm.
But before I get into that, I also ask you what has happened in the past, because I need to validate your life experiences to what I see. What I see is a representation. It could be wrong, because when do you record the time of birth? You see, so there are many errors that might that are in place. Do you take the time of the birth when the head pops out, or when the umbilical cord is cut, or
whoa.
And how do you guarantee whether the clock works, and when did you look at the clock, and who wrote it? So there's so many errors from
Oh my gosh.
And then there's this whole thing about daylight savings time, and so.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh my God!
And then there's the war times for the older people, so it gets really crazy. So I try to actually look at what has happened before to validate what I'm looking at. If it's not working out, then I say, hey, we need to actually check it out or find some other way to do this.
Right.
The next thing is that I do that, and then after the reading, there's a one follow-up, because what happens is the information is quite a lot, and sometimes you wish you had asked a question or something like that, which
Yeah.
is also included. So you can follow up via email or by calling. So one of the things I do is actually we just do it over the email. You can record it if you want. I wouldn't allow that before.
Oh, okay.
Now I do.
Yeah.
But basically, I have a U.S. contact number, so I can call people too.
Or y'all can use Zoom. Zoom is so
Oh,
easy. If you just
we
click
can
on recording.
exactly we can use
Remember?
Zoom,
Yeah.
and and to do this exercise, I do ask. Basically, we work on a donation basis, but then what happened was people were giving me like $30 for 5 hours of work.
Oh no.
Which then forced me to keep up a minimum,
Oh
because
yeah.
otherwise I just don't want to waste my time. I've got so
Oh
much to
no. Yeah.
do.
You're a
Yeah,
busy guy.
so the minimum donation I look for is for this sort of exercise is $200.
Oh my God,
And
that's a bargain compared to what it can do for you in business, health, relationships, just all facets of your life.
exactly, and it's like going to a general practitioner, and you see, when you go and see a general practitioner, they send you somewhere else for doing the tests.
Yeah.
Then they tell you to go see a specialist, and then you got to start all over again, and the specialist wants you to redo the test.
I know. Oh, that's silly.
Basically, what I'm doing is like, you come to me, I give you an idea, and then I guide you through that. I mean, it's worth a lot.
It is, yes,
And
absolutely.
I'm just using that $200 just to sort of use it as a transactional fee rather than,
Right. I mean, it's energy exchange. It's equal exchange. All right.
exactly.
So where can they it's well, I'll just say SVATMANANDA.org, and I will put that here. Any other way to contact you, or?
And they can also email me, and I'll spell it out again. Is SVATMANANDA@gmail.com.
And I'll try to remember to put that there too. All right. Thank you, Sri
Thank you.
Swami.
It was fun again talking to you.
Like,
And
boom, wow, so many things. Oh my God, it's much more complicated than I thought.
it's incredibly complex.
Incredible.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you. I still love you.
I love you too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.